Hi, this is Linda from Back to the Beach Software, and I want to talk to you a little bit about the two different kinds of graphics that we use in Web Studio and how you can work with both of them. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about vector graphics and bitmap graphics. So let's look at the differences between those two. A vector graphic is really one that looks like a drawing. It has a drawing format, and when it's created, it uses mathematical points and lines. The results are very clean, they're very clear, they're very crisp. When you reduce and enlarge vector graphics, they don't lose any of the quality. They continue to look the same regardless of how many times you resize them. And they're often used for logos, and they have a real drawing look, like this little puppy on our left. He is a vector. Look at how clean he looks. He almost has like a Walt Disney look to him. The other kind of graphic is called a bitmap. And all graphics that are not vectors are bitmaps. The most familiar, for instance, is photographs. And bitmaps are made out of little tiny squares of color that are called pixels. The pixels are laying next to each other, and each pixel has its own color, and when they're squeezed together and they blend together, they produce a photograph. Our little puppy on the right is a photograph, and he is made up of tiny squares of color. And you can see immediately the difference between a vector and a photo, or a bitmap. Now, the quality of the bitmap depends on how many DPIs, which is dots per inch, that you have. Because a bitmap is made up of little tiny squares of color, the more dots you have per inch, the better quality is your image. The problem, however, is that when you do a lot of resizing with a bitmap, it can lose quality. And the reason for this is because every time a bitmap is resized, the pixels have to be changed. For instance, if I enlarge this puppy, the pixels that are in between are going to pick up color from the surrounding pixels to fill in so that the picture is enlarged. When I reduce that picture, the opposite is going to happen. It's going to have to lose some pixels. You'll notice when you're working in Web Studio, if you have a photograph and you've resized it several times, it's going to start looking pretty crummy. And so one of the little hints that I want to give you is when I'm working on my websites, and I do several websites, I always add a page to my website, label it construction pieces, and I keep copies of everything before I make any changes. So if I'm doing a lot of work on a photo and it starts looking crummy, I just delete it, go over to my construction page, pick up another copy, and start working on it. So the difference is vector graphics are drawing formats with mathematical points and lines that create very clean-looking drawings. All other graphics are bitmaps. Let's look at Web Studio and how it handles graphics. Web Studio has two different kinds of graphics that it handles. It handles vector graphics, and it handles all other graphics, which are bitmaps. The way that it handles vector graphics is that in the Draw tab, there is a Shapes command that creates vector drawings. I can click on this circle, bring it down here. I should probably give it some color so you can see it a little better. And I want you to notice that it comes in with a transparent edge all around, and the only thing you see is the circle. That's because Web Studio handles the transparency of these vector images automatically. I can enlarge it, I can reduce it, and I can keep doing that, and the edges will stay clear and clean. I can overlay them. I can take different types. I can make graduated fills, and I can create a whole series of vector graphics using the Shapes command. Web Studio is able to handle all other types of graphics. And when they are brought into Web Studio, they are all changed to either a GIF or a JPEG. This means that if you have created a vector in another program and you insert it into Web Studio, it will no longer be a vector drawing. It will be changed into a bitmap. Let's look at this circle. I created this circle in Photoshop. When I created it, it had a clear, transparent background. But when I inserted it into Web Studio, because Web Studio changes it into a bitmap for a graphic, it, instead of being a vector, which is a drawing, it became a pixeled image that has a lot of little tiny squares that are next to each other. This means that when you insert any kind of graphic into Web Studio, it turns into a bitmap, and it then has a rectangular background. It is a rectangle or a square. If the background was transparent, Web Studio fills in that background with white. So when we talk to you about graphics in Web Studio, we are usually referring to bitmaps. We will say to you, for instance, that when you bring something in, it has a graphic, and graphics are always squares or rectangles. So I've made this circle in another program, but I don't want to see the white. So let's go over and look at some things that happen with transparency. I'm going to pretend for a moment that this dark color is the background of my page. This circle was made using the Shapes command. I can move it around. I can put it on this dark piece. I can move it to the light piece. It doesn't matter. It's a vector that's automatically made transparent by Web Studio. But this one was brought in, and now it's a bitmap. So I'm going to see if I can use a feature in Web Studio, a transparency feature, to turn off the white. I can go to I can right-click, choose transparent, and click white. What you'll see happen is that it appears that most of the white is gone, but not all. Actually, what has happened is all of the white really is gone. But let's go back to how a bitmap is made. It's made using little tiny squares of color. And in order to create what appears to be a seamless transition between peach and my darker color, a bitmap creates little pixels that are a color in between. So even though I removed all of the completely white pixels, there are some light pixels that are left around the edge, and they look very jagged. So if I'm creating an image with curved lines in another program, and I remove the white, it's going to look very jagged if I have it on a dark background. I'm going to move this circle over to the background of my page, which is kind of a taupe color. It's a different color, but it is a color that is almost the same value as the peach circle. I want you to notice how much cleaner the circle looks now. This means that if you're going to bring in something with curved lines into Web Studio and you're going to put it on a different color, but that color is of about the same value as your image, you can get away with just making the white transparent. But if you're going to use it on a dark color, you're not going to be able to do that. So the big question is, when you're looking at a website and when you're building your own, what you want to know is, how did they do that? How did they bring in that image on that website? I can absolutely see this image. It is filled with curved lines. It looks beautiful on the page. How did they do it? Well, the easiest answer, and the one that I like to use the most often, is to put the image on a white background. So let's look at our little bird here. I'm going to make a copy of him, and I'm going to bring him over to a background that's white. And I'm going to paste him on. And immediately, he looks seamless on the page. That's because the background on that rectangle matches the background on the page. And because the background comes in as white, I can put it on a white page, no problem. Well, if your page isn't white, what are you going to do? Let's bring our little bird with us and go over to the green page. And I see that he's here already. And one of the options is to, in your web design, create a panel that's white to put your object on. We'll get rid of him now. You can make it large. You can make it small. I put him over here on this panel. You can even have different panels of color in your web design. For instance, this one could be the light green. And use the design itself to give yourself some white so this little bird can sit on the white, or another image. Let's go back to the vector and go get our puppy. See, he also looks good on white. So the first and easiest answer to how did they do that is they put it on white. That's your easiest answer all the time. But if you're a web designer, or you've really gotten into Web Studio and you're finding out how much fun it is, you may not want a white background. So the way that we solve this problem is to create this graphic in a different program and then bring it in. And what we want to do is we want to match this background around the image to the background that you're going to have on the page. If you're a Photoshop user, you're very familiar with this. You create a couple of layers. You put the bird on the top. You eliminate the white space around the bird, and you put your background on the bottom layer. You can leave it as a PSD. You do not have to export it as any other file. And when you go to Web Studio, you can insert the image. However, you may not have Photoshop, and you may not want to spend $300 on Photoshop, and then you may not want to even learn Photoshop. There's a big learning curve with it. I did something the other day. I went out on Google, and I did a little search for free graphics programs. And I discovered, to my delight, that there's several free programs out there that you can get that look like they're fairly easy. I read some blogs, got some good information, and went ahead and trialed one of them called Paint.net. And I actually made this little bird in Paint.net. And the way that I did it was I opened up a new file. I created 2 layers. I made the background layer black, and then on the top layer, I pasted the bird. Now, when I pasted the bird, I couldn't see the black underneath. What I saw was this, because I pasted the bird. I then used 2 different tools that are in PaintNet to get rid of these 3 areas of white. The first tool I used was called the Magic Wand. And with the Magic Wand, you click on an area, and then you hit delete, and it removes that color. I did that for all 3 of those areas. I was left, however, with those little pixels of color that were kind of halfway between the white and the black trim of my bird. So I picked up the eraser tool, and I went around the edge of my bird, and I just erased those pixels. As soon as it was erased, this is what I saw in Paint.net. After I fixed my picture and had it looking exactly the way I wanted it, I saved it as a JPEG. When I saved it as a JPEG, that opened up my folders on my computer. I navigated to the folder that I wanted to go to, and I gave it a name, and I saved it as a JPEG. We do have a wiki article on how to do this with Paint.net. And if you go to our wiki and go to tips and tricks, you'll see the free program Paint.net, and you'll see exactly how to do that. Once this was made, I came to Web Studio. I went to the Insert tab, clicked on Insert Picture, navigated to the picture that I wanted to open, opened it, and it was put on the page. So now I have a bird with a black background. Let's see what that bird looks like on a black background. Because I've matched the background of my graphic to the background of my page, now it looks completely seamless. So the way they do it is they match the background that goes around that bitmap to the background that's on the page. You can put any background behind this bird. For instance, if your background is a check pattern or stripes or something, you can put them behind the bird. When you put it on the page, you will have to match up those lines. So the short answer is, when you can, put it on white. When you can't, use Photoshop or one of the free programs to match the background. I hope that helped you today, and I hope you have fun with Web Studio. Thank you.